What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Hoops and Stuff podcast. I'm your host, Isaac, and today we're going to continue our series that we started in episode 14, where we talk about 5 teams. And if you want to go check out episode 14 after this, you can. It'll go more into detail about what this series is more about. But today we're going to be talking about the Northwest Division, and this is going to be the first division in the West that we talk about. So to start off, we have the Nuggets. And the Nuggets are a great team. Jokic is, in my opinion, Jokic is definitely a top 10 center of all time. And his career is not even close to over. He still has quite a few years left in the tank. And he's definitely, he could probably go down as a top 5 center. Jamal Murray and Jokic are a really underrated duo, I feel like. Because, like, not like a couple games ago, because they're in the finals, obviously. So a couple games ago, they both had like a 30-point triple double, which is insane. Two phenomenal players. And speaking of the finals, they are 3-1 against the Heat, which is really good. Obviously, they're playing phenomenal. I mean, none of the games have been like blowouts really. They've all been like, I feel like they've all been pretty good games, but I feel like Jimmy Butler just stopped performing in the finals like he was in the rest of the playoffs, and the Nuggets have just stepped up. Jokic and Murray both just been playing phenomenal, so that is a really big reason why the Nuggets have that 3-1 lead against the Heat. And in the off season, I think that the Nuggets should definitely try to either draft or pick up a power forward in free agency, because I mean right now they have Aaron Gordon, who is definitely getting older and is out of his prime by now. So he could probably come off the bench for them next season if they can get somebody solid to start at power forward alongside Jokic. And the last thing that I want to talk about for the Nuggets is a specific player who they've just gotten recently, and it's Christian Brown. I think you say it, I think how you said it's Brown. I don't remember if it's Braun or Brown, but Christian Brown. I'm pretty sure it's Brown. I always get it mixed up. But I've seen him play quite a bit, and he looks really good. And he's like a taller guard. He's like six. He's like either six. He's like 6'5". I'm pretty sure. So he's a really solid player, and he's a really solid build for his position. And he's like I've seen him sort of throw out some nasty dunks. Like, he's a really good player. Next up, we're gonna talk about the Jazz, who definitely have quite a bit of young pieces, and that's definitely like they have like Walker Kessler. I think I get there's like two Walkers. Like there's two Walkers that I always get mixed up. I'm pretty sure they have Walker Kessler though. Or they have like Lauri Markkanen, who's still pretty young, who's been doing pretty good for them. And that having those young players are definitely gonna make your team better down the road, because once they develop, they're gonna become those superstar players that every team really needs to win a championship. And they also have a lot of picks after trading away Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. They have tons of picks in the future. So hopefully those will work out for them, and they can add on to those young pieces that they already have and get some future superstars. Because I mean the Jazz were really good when they had Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, but they could never pull off that championship win. So hopefully they can get it eventually. I think possibly they could draft like a guard in this year's draft, or pick up somebody in free agency at the guard, because I mean they have like players like Lauri Markkanen, or like I said, Walker Kessler, who are both big guys. So they really need that guard play, I feel like, and I feel like that's what's definitely going to benefit the team most. And I really, for the last thing that I want to talk about is really just like their overall. I feel like they should just get what they can. Like I feel like they should just offer the best players in free agency a contract. So like, and even if you don't want to use that player, eventually you can trade them and you can get somebody else that you actually want on your team because they definitely do need quite a bit of help and they're definitely in that rebuilding stage right now. So the Jazz in the future could be pretty good though. Next up we have the Trailblazers, and there's been some talks about Dame going to a new team this season, and they could possibly try to trade Dame to get a really high pick in the draft, which would be a pretty good move considering Dame is like he's getting older, and you really just want to bring in that younger talent so that they can develop into a better player as they get older. And like you're not going to be able to keep that older player forever. So you have to get rid of them. Even if they still have a couple of really good years left in the tank, you can't risk it because you want to bring in new players that are like really young players that are gonna be good in the future, so that you can keep being like you can stay good. And if they trade Dame away for the pick, I think they're probably going to end up drafting Scoot Henderson to replace Damian Lillard at that guard position because Scoot Henderson is a great player, and I feel like him and Shaden Sharp, who the Trailblazers also have, are two players who are a lot alike. They're both still young, and they're both just explosive dunkers. They find their way to the rim and just boom, like they can both do some great stuff with the ball. And I feel like if they can end up getting Scoot Henderson to go along with players like Anthony Simons, Shaden Sharp, and Jeremy Grant, that would be an ultimate that would be a great team, an ultimate team. And speaking of Anthony Simons and Shaden Sharp, I feel like after those two players get better, because obviously they're both still young and they're good players right now, but I think eventually they'll definitely get better and they'll be a great duo after they develop, and maybe that duo will turn into a trio and they'll have another really good player that'll join them, and like especially if they draft like Scoot Henderson, like that's gonna be a great trio. And the last thing that I want to talk about for the Trailblazers is a specific player that I definitely think that they should trade, and that is Yusuf Nurkic. Yusuf Nurkic is a solid center, but I think that they could get somebody better. And like I feel like he definitely has some value for like he has some value, but they could get somebody that's gonna play better for them. And I don't really, I don't know who. Maybe like I feel like a Miles Turner would be a good fit for the Trailblazers. He's a pretty solid player, but because I feel like they could definitely use a shooter at the big man position. So Miles Turner can shoot the ball a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So they could definitely use him, or maybe if they want to trade away quite a bit of picks, they could maybe possibly trade for Karl Anthony Towns. But I don't think that the Timberwolves are going to be willing to give him up very easily. Our next team is the Thunder, who have tons of picks. They have they have like 15 picks like from now to 2029. It's like some crazy amount. I'm pretty sure it's 15 first round picks. It's insane. And those players are they're going to be able to draft a lot of players with those picks obviously, and those players are all going to be young. And I think that with all those picks, I think that within the next decade, after all those younger players start to develop more, the Thunder will definitely end up being at least a championship contender, if not getting the. I think that they'll definitely be a championship contender if they don't already get a championship at that point, because all those players are going to be in their mid to late 20s, and that's usually around like your prime. That's your prime like period is your later 20s usually, and I feel like that's gonna definitely be good for the Thunder, but they definitely need to have players like Chet Holmgren or Oleksiy Pokashevsky, who are both really big players over 7'1". I'm pretty sure Pokashevsky is like 7'1" and Chet is like 7'2" or something like that. So both really big, really skinny players, and it's definitely going to be hard for players like that to stay healthy in the league. And I feel like that's the problem with a lot of players who are like super tall, like Victor Wembanyama or Chet Holmgren, Oleksiy Pokashevsky. They're all over 7 foot, but they're skin and bones, and it's just like it's so easy for them to get hurt, and they could have career-ending injuries. That's what happens to a lot of these players that are like well over 7 foot. Like obviously we've seen Yao Ming go out with a lot of injuries, especially to like their knees and stuff. I definitely think with those picks that the Thunder have, they need to draft, like they need to play the drafts, like the draft picks really smart, and they need to pick players who not are just good but also fit their system, because if the player doesn't fit the system, then they're not going to be good, and you need them to be good and fit your system at the same time. And the problem with having all those draft picks is you're going to get so many young players who will eventually be really good. And as those players get better, they want more and more and more and more money. So you're going to have to keep paying all these players more and more money. But eventually you're going to reach that salary cap and you're not going to have money to pay those players. And you're going to end up losing a lot of them. So they should definitely try to trade away at least probably half of their draft picks because they have so many. But they should try to definitely trade up to get better players with those draft picks, like better players than they already have. And also, I think that the Thunder, for right now, until they get some really great players to develop, I feel like they should definitely keep playing through Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and using him as much as possible, because had a really good season, and I think that he'll definitely be an all-star this year. I feel like, because even this past season he had like 30 points a game, and he was just playing phenomenal. Now he's gonna have Chet Holmgren, so I think that the Thunder will definitely be a solid team here this year. And our final team is going to be the Timberwolves. And the first thing we have to talk about is Anthony Edwards, who he has a great, promising future, and I think that he could definitely go places with the Timberwolves or possibly even another team, because the Timberwolves are a solid team, but he could definitely be on a better team, and with the talent that he has, I would not want it to go to waste. So if he has to move teams, then he has to move teams, because with that, like I said, with that amount of talent, he should definitely have a championship by the end of his career. He's a great player, and he's another one of those really explosive players. He just finds his way to the rim and he yams it down. Another player for the Timberwolves that I want to talk about is Rudy Gobert, who is he's getting older, so he's getting worse. And I mean, he's still a great defensive player, but he's not getting he's not a scorer, which is really his problem. And those points per game just keep going down and down and down, and it's getting worse. And really, all you can use him for at this point is like rebounds and blocking. And eventually, that's gonna go down too, because as you get older, just all your stats start to get worse usually. I think that this team should definitely try to get a point guard or a center in free agency, or in the draft or something, like either in free agency or the draft, they should try to get a point guard or a center because, I mean, they have Mike Conley for point guard, who is a solid player, but he's getting older, so you're definitely going to need to replace him soon. And same with Rudy Gobert at center. They're going to need to replace him soon as he gets older. I mean, you could run Cat at center again, but Karl-Anthony Towns is starting to get more into that power forward position, I feel like. So I think that they should definitely just leave him at the power forward position. And speaking of Karl-Anthony Towns, he is one of the best big man shooters ever. I mean, obviously, traditional big men are like paint beasts who just get tons of boards, tons of blocks, and they just dunk on their defenders in the post. But like Karl-Anthony Towns is more of like he plays like a guard, but he's built like a power forward, and that's a really good combination to have because he can shoot the ball, he can finish a little bit, he can get you multiple aspects of the game all in one player, and that I feel like that's what makes him underrated. And the final player that I want to talk about for the Timberwolves, and this is going to be the final thing that I talk about for the video, is Jaden McDaniels. Jaden McDaniels is a young player, and he is a very underrated young player at that. He is a phenomenal player that I just feel like many people don't see because they see these other talents like Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns, and they just overlook Jaden McDaniels, who did go out at the end of the season with a broken hand injury after punching a wall. But he is definitely a solid player, and I feel like eventually he could be more than just a role player because he can give you some solid points, and I feel like he's a solid like small forward, power forward option. That's gonna be it for today's episode. If you enjoyed, hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and let me know down in the comments, out of these 5 teams that I talked about today, which team do you think is the best? And honestly, I think it's a pretty obvious answer, but I want to see what you guys think and who you guys like the most out of the Northwest Division. But I'll see you guys next time on the Hoops and Stuff podcast.